My name is Margaret Thompson, and I'm 68 years old. 5 years ago, at 2 a.m., I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone plotting to dump me in a nursing home and steal my house. "Tomorrow we're taking her," she whispered. "Everything is already arranged." My blood ran cold. Within an hour, I'd vanished into the night with nothing but my purse and the most important documents of my life. The next morning, they were desperately searching for me, but I was already 3 steps ahead with a plan that would expose their greed to everyone we knew. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is a story every parent needs to hear. It had been 5 years since my husband Robert passed away. 5 long years of living in the house I'd bought with my own savings from 30 years of teaching elementary school. The 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Street wasn't just property to me. It was the fruit of every parent-teacher conference, every graded paper, every early morning I'd spent preparing lessons while Robert was still sleeping. 6 months after the funeral, my son David and his wife Sandra moved in. "Just temporarily, Mom," David had promised, "until we get back on our feet." That was 4.5 years ago. At first, I was grateful for the company. The house had felt so empty without Robert's laughter filling the rooms. But gradually, things began to change. Sandra started making comments about my forgetfulness when I couldn't find things she'd moved. David began intercepting my mail, claiming he was helping me manage my finances. "Mom, you're getting older," he'd say with that patronizing smile. "Maybe we should handle the banking for you. It's so complicated these days with all the online stuff." I'd run my own finances for 40 years. I'd managed our investments, paid off the mortgage, and saved enough for what I thought would be a comfortable retirement. But suddenly, I was being treated like a child. Sandra was worse. She'd go through my jewelry box to help organize, she claimed. She'd rearrange my kitchen until I couldn't find my own coffee mugs. And always, she'd ask about the house papers. "Where do you keep the deed, Mom Thompson?" she'd ask sweetly. "Just in case of an emergency, we should know where everything is." I'd changed the subject, but the questions never stopped. Something wasn't right, and deep in my bones, I knew it. The first real warning came from my granddaughter, Emily. She was home from medical school for Thanksgiving, and I found her crying in the garden where I grew my roses. "Grandma," she whispered, looking over her shoulder to make sure we were alone. "Please be careful. I don't like what I'm hearing." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She bit her lip, torn between loyalty to her parents and love for me. "I heard them talking about long-term solutions for you. Dad kept saying you're becoming a burden." A burden. The word stung more than I let her see. I'd raised that boy, put him through college working double shifts during tax season. I'd babysit Emily for free for years while David and Sandra built their careers. And now I was a burden? That evening, I started paying closer attention. I noticed David's laptop open to websites for nursing homes. Not just any nursing homes, but the cheapest ones on the outskirts of town. Places with names like Sunset Manor and Golden Years Facility that looked more like hospitals than homes. Sandra had left a brochure on the kitchen counter. Accidentally, she claimed when I asked. "Oh, that's for my aunt," she said quickly, snatching it away. But her aunt lived in Florida and was 15 years younger than me. I started keeping a journal, hidden in my old sewing box where Sandra never looked. Every strange comment, every suspicious glance between them, every time they whispered and stopped when I entered the room. The pattern was becoming clear. "Mom's really declining," I heard David tell someone on the phone one evening. "We're looking at options." Declining? I still drove myself to book club every Wednesday, volunteered at the church twice a week, and could beat both of them at Scrabble any day of the week. So, January 15th, 2:00 a.m. That's when everything changed. I'd gotten up for my usual glass of water. Robert always said I had the bladder of a hummingbird when I heard Sandra's voice from their bedroom. She was on the phone, and she wasn't trying to be quiet. "Everything is arranged for tomorrow," she said. "The intake coordinator at Willowbrook said we can bring her by noon. She won't even know what hit her. By tomorrow night, we'll have the house to ourselves." My legs nearly gave out. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. "The paperwork? No, we don't need her to sign anything. David has power of attorney from when she had that minor surgery 2 years ago. She never revoked it." Sandra laughed. Actually laughed. "The old fool trusts him completely." Old fool. Is that what I'd become to them? "Once she's in, we can start the process to sell the house. Market's hot right now. We could get at least $400,000. That'll clear our debts and leave plenty for the down payment on the Riverside place. Their debts. They were planning to sell my house to pay their debts. I crept back to my room, my mind racing. They were coming for me tomorrow. In less than 10 hours, they planned to lock me away and steal everything I'd worked for. My hands shook as I pulled out my emergency tote bag from the closet. I packed quickly, silently. My medications, some clothes, and most importantly, the manila folder I'd hidden behind my winter coats. The folder with the real deed, the real power of attorney documents, and something else they didn't know about. By 3:00 a.m., I was slipping out the back door, my heart breaking with every step. The January air bit at my face as I walked the 6 blocks to Eleanor Hayes' house. Even at 3:30 in the morning, I knew she'd answer. That's what 40 years of friendship means. You answer the door at any hour, no questions asked. Eleanor opened the door in her silk robe, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. "Margaret, what's happened?" When I told her everything, her expression went from concern to fury. "I've been telling you to protect yourself," she said, already reaching for her phone. "Those vultures. Thank God you got out." What David and Sandra didn't know was that Eleanor wasn't just my bridge partner and best friend. She was also a retired circuit court judge with more connections than a telephone switchboard. And she'd been suspicious of them for months. "Remember when I suggested you see Michael Rivers?" she asked, referring to the attorney she'd recommended 6 months ago. "Please, tell me you went." I nodded, finally allowing myself a small smile. "I've been seeing him monthly. Everything's in order." "Good girl." Eleanor poured us both coffee despite the hour. "Now, let's call Michael and plan your comeback. They want to play dirty? They have no idea who they're messing with." By 4:00 a.m., Michael Rivers was on speakerphone, wide awake and taking notes. "Mrs. Thompson, do you have the documents we prepared?" "Everything's in my bag." "Perfect. Now they'll panic when they find you gone. Let them. The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they'll make." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this, Margaret. You never were." For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. They thought I was just a helpless old woman. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. By 8:00 a.m., my phone was buzzing nonstop. 23 missed calls from David, 15 from Sandra, and a dozen text messages ranging from concerned to frantic. "Mom, where are you? Please call us back. We're worried sick. This isn't funny anymore." I watched the messages pile up from Eleanor's kitchen table, while Michael Rivers spread out legal documents like he was preparing for battle. "They've already called the police," Emily texted me separately. "Dad's telling everyone you wandered off confused. Grandma, he's saying you have dementia." "Dementia? Of course that would be their story. Let them spin their web," Michael said calmly. "Every lie they tell now will come back to haunt them later." By noon, the exact time they'd planned to dump me at Willowbrook, David had escalated. He'd called my sister in Boston, my cousins in Chicago, even my elderly aunt in the nursing home, telling everyone I was missing and possibly dangerous to myself. "He's arranging a family meeting," Emily reported in another secret text. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Le Bernardin downtown. He's telling everyone it's an emergency intervention. Grandma, there'll be at least 30 people there." Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Michael looked up from his papers with a shark smile. "A public gathering with the entire family present? He's just given us the perfect stage." Eleanor was already on her phone making her own calls. "Judge Patterson owes me a favor. And Detective Morrison? Remember him, Margaret? He specializes in elder abuse cases." I felt like a general preparing for war, except my battlefield would be white tablecloths and crystal glasses, and my weapons would be the truth. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Michael asked. I thought about 5 years of being diminished, dismissed, and disrespected in my own home. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Le Bernardin was the kind of restaurant where David would never normally spend money. Crisp white tablecloths, soft jazz, and entrees that cost more than my weekly groceries. But apparently, stealing his mother's house was worth the expense of keeping up appearances. Emily had been texting me updates all morning. "They've reserved the private dining room. Dad's wearing his best suit. Mom bought a new dress, black, like she's already in mourning." The family started arriving at 1:45. My sister Helen flew in from Boston. My brother Tom drove up from Philadelphia. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even my godchildren. David had called them all. The story he'd told them was elaborate. I'd been showing signs of dementia for months. I'd wandered off in confusion, and now they needed everyone's support for an intervention when they found me. "He's really playing it up," Emily texted at 1:55, "talking about how you've been forgetting things, getting paranoid, accusing them of stealing. He actually has tears in his eyes." David stood at the head of the table, Sandra clutching his arm in performed grief. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice cracking with fake emotion. "As you know, Mom's been struggling. We've tried to care for her at home, but after she disappeared yesterday, we realized she needs professional help." My cousin Martha was dabbing her eyes. Aunt Rose was shaking her head sadly. They were all buying it. "We've found a wonderful facility," Sandra added, pulling out Willowbrook's brochure. "They specialize in memory care. It's what's best for Mom." That's when I heard my brother Tom ask the question that made me proud. "When you find her, shouldn't we hear what Margaret wants?" David's face tightened just a fraction. "Of course, Uncle Tom, but in her current state, she can't make rational decisions. That's why we need to act as a family." The door to the private dining room opened. It was time. Can you imagine your own children plotting against you like this? If you've ever felt betrayed by family or struggled to set boundaries with toxic relatives, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Margaret's situation? Would you have confronted them immediately or planned your revenge like she did? Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this grandmother turns the tables on her greedy family. Now let's see what happens when Margaret walks through that restaurant door. I walked through that door with Michael Rivers at my side, my head held high, wearing my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, the one that made me feel strong. The entire room fell silent. 30 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Sandra's new black dress suddenly seemed premature. "Hello, everyone," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the stunned silence. "I heard you were looking for me." David's face went through a spectacular range of colors. White, red, then a sort of grayish green. Sandra's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish, but it was the relief on Tom's and Helen's faces that gave me strength. "Mom!" David finally managed, starting toward me. "Thank God you're safe. Where have you been? We were so worried." I held up my hand, stopping him mid-approach. "I've been exactly where I needed to be, David, with my attorney." Michael stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. In his tailored suit and with his silver hair, he looked exactly like what he was: expensive, competent, and ruthless when necessary. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced, "I'm Michael Rivers, Mrs. Thompson's legal counsel. We have some important information to share with all of you." Sandra found her voice, shrill and desperate. "This is ridiculous. She's confused. You can see she's not thinking clearly." "On the contrary," I said, taking my seat at the table with deliberate calm, "I've never been more clear-headed in my life. And I have something everyone needs to hear about why I disappeared." I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the play button of a recording. "But first, I think you should all hear what prompted my sudden departure." David's face had gone completely white. He knew exactly what was coming. "Before I play this," I said, looking around the table at my family, "I want you all to know that I didn't want it to come to this. But when you're about to be thrown away like garbage, you do what you have to do." I pressed play. Sandra's voice filled the private dining room, crystal clear, despite being recorded through a bedroom wall. "Everything is arranged for tomorrow. The intake coordinator at Willowbrook said we can bring her by noon. She won't even know what hit her." Gasps rippled around the table. My sister Helen's hand flew to her mouth. The recording continued. "The old fool trusts him completely. Once she's in, we can start the process to sell the house." "Turn it off!" Sandra shrieked, lunging for my phone. Michael smoothly intercepted her, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Thompson, please sit down." "That's taken out of context," David stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. We were discussing options. Mom's been paranoid, making recordings, seeing things that aren't there." "Really?" I asked, pulling out my journal. "So I was paranoid when I documented you going through my financial papers at 2 a.m. on December 3rd? When you had Sandra call nursing homes on December 15th, 18th, and 22nd? When you told the bank you were my financial power of attorney, which you're not, by the way?" Tom stood up slowly, his face dark with anger. "David, is this true? You were planning to put your mother in a home and sell her house?" "Uncle Tom, you don't understand the burden." "Burden?" Helen's voice cut like ice. "She's your mother!" The room erupted. Cousins were shouting questions, aunts were expressing disgust, and through it all, Sandra sat there with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of remorse, but tears of rage at being caught. "Let me tell you about context," I said, standing up as the room quieted. "Context is 5 years of being treated like a child in my own home. Context is my daughter-in-law selling my mother's china, the set that survived the Depression, because she thought I wouldn't notice. Sandra's mascara was running in black streams. That's not true." "I have the pawn shop receipts," I said quietly. "Would you like me to show everyone?" Michael opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Thompson has documented extensive financial exploitation. In the past 2 years alone, Mr. and Mrs. David Thompson have taken approximately $43,000 from her accounts." "We had permission," David shouted. "She gave us permission." "To pay for groceries," I clarified. "Not for your gambling debts, David." "Oh yes, I know about those too. The casino calls the house looking for you. Did you think I was too senile to understand?" My nephew James, who worked at a bank, leaned forward. "Aunt Margaret, are you saying they've been stealing from you?" "I'm saying they've been planning to steal everything from me. But here's what they didn't know. The house they're so eager to sell, it's not in both our names like they think." I nodded to Michael, who produced the deed. "This house is solely in Margaret Thompson's name. Purchased before her marriage, maintained with her separate funds, never converted to marital property, and certainly never given to her son." David's jaw dropped. But Dad always said—" "Your father respected that this was my house, bought with my money, my security. He had his pension, this was mine, and it will never be yours." The silence in the room was deafening. Michael continued with the precision of a surgeon. "Furthermore, Mrs. Thompson has maintained all household expenses for the past 5 years. Property taxes, utilities, maintenance, groceries, all paid from her personal accounts. She has, in essence, been providing free housing and financial support to 2 able-bodied adults who have contributed nothing." "That's a lie!" Sandra stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "We've been taking care of her." "Really?" I pulled out another document. "This is my medical report from last week. Dr. Harrison confirms I'm in excellent health, mentally and physically. My cognitive test scores are perfect. My blood pressure is better than yours, Sandra. I saw your medication in the bathroom." Emily, who had been silent until now, stood up. "I need to say something." David turned to his daughter, desperation in his eyes. "Emily, sweetheart, tell them how confused Grandma's been." Emily looked at her father with disgust. "The only confusion in that house is how you sleep at night. I've watched you and Mom treat Grandma like she's already dead while living off her money." "Emily!" Sandra gasped. "How dare you?" "How dare I? How dare you?" Emily's voice rose. "Do you know what Grandma did for me? She paid for my first 2 years of medical school when you told me you couldn't afford it. She never told me until I found the receipts. You were taking her money while telling me you were broke." The family erupted again. Aunt Rose was shaking her head in disgust. Uncle Tom looked ready to throw punches. And through it all, David kept trying to salvage his story. "She's old. She needs help. We were trying to do what's best." "No," I said firmly. "You were trying to do what's best for your bank account." "Let me paint you the full picture," I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. "For 5 years, I've paid for everything. The roof repair last spring, $8,000. The new furnace, $6,000. Their car insurance, $300 a month. Their groceries, their utilities, even their Netflix subscription, all while being told I'm too confused to handle money." I pulled out bank statements, spreading them on the table. "Here's January through December of last year. Every withdrawal, every payment. Notice how David's business trips coincide with charges at the Riverside Casino?" David's business partner, who'd been invited to this family intervention, stood up abruptly. "David, is this true? You told me your mother was funding our startup expansion." "She was," David protested weakly, "with money stolen from her accounts," Michael interjected, "without her knowledge or consent. That's fraud, Mr. Thompson, and depending on the amounts, it could be a felony." Sandra grabbed David's arm. "We should go." "Sit down," Tom commanded, his voice carrying the authority of the former Marine he was. "You're not going anywhere until we sort this out." "Here's what else they didn't know," I continued. 6 months ago, when Eleanor suggested I see a lawyer, I also hired a private investigator. Would you like to know what he found?" David's face went from pale to ashen. "Gambling debts of $60,000, 3 mortgages on properties they don't own, all using my address as collateral reference. And Sandra, that online boutique you claim is so successful, it's been losing money for 2 years. You've been floating it with my Social Security checks. My godson Marcus, who was a police officer, pulled out his phone. Aunt Margaret, this is criminal. Do you want me to make some calls? Not yet, I said. I'm not finished. Emily moved to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. I have something to add, she said, pulling out her own phone. I've been recording things too, Grandma. Every time they talked about you when they thought I wasn't listening. She played a video. It was Sandra in the kitchen, talking to her sister on speakerphone. The old bat just won't die. We need that house money now, not in 10 years. Another video. David at dinner, just last week. I told Mom we're checking on her medications, but I'm actually looking for her will. There has to be something we can use. The family's disgust was palpable. Cousin Martha stood up, pointing at David. You're a monster. Aunt Margaret raised you better than this. You don't understand the pressure we're under, David exploded. Do you know what it's like to be 42 and a failure? To have your mother look at you with disappointment every single day? I never looked at you with disappointment, I said quietly. Until now. Emily continued, her voice strong. There's more. They were planning to claim Grandma was incompetent. They had a doctor lined up, Sandra's cousin who lost his license in Nevada but still practices here illegally. They were going to drug her and have her declared unfit. Gasps echoed around the room. Marcus, my godson the police officer, was now definitely making calls. That's enough, Emily, Sandra hissed. You ungrateful little— What? Truth teller? Emily shot back. I'm done being silent. Grandma took me in when you kicked me out for changing my major. She supported me when you wouldn't, and you were planning to lock her away like she was nothing. Helen stood up, tears in her eyes. Margaret, I'm so sorry. We should have seen this. We should have protected you. I protected myself, I said firmly. But thank you. Sandra finally snapped. She stood up, knocking over her water glass, her face contorted with rage. You sanctimonious old witch! After everything we've done, we gave up our lives to take care of you. You gave up nothing, I replied calmly. You moved in rent-free, ate my food, used my utilities, and plotted to steal my home. It should be ours, Sandra screamed. We're your family. That house should go to David anyway. Why are you being so selfish? Selfish? Tom laughed bitterly. She's been supporting you parasites for 5 years. Sandra turned on him. Stay out of this. You don't know what we've been through. The humiliation of living with her, having to ask permission for everything, being treated like children. You were never treated like children, I said. Children contribute chores. Children show respect. You two did neither. David finally found his voice again, switching tactics to emotional manipulation. Mom, please, we're your family. We made mistakes, but we love you. Dad would want us to work this out. Don't you dare, I said, my voice sharp as glass. Don't you dare invoke your father. Robert would be ashamed of what you've become. He worked honest jobs his whole life, never took what wasn't his, never schemed or lied. He'd throw you out himself if he saw this. We'll sue, Sandra threatened. We'll contest everything. We have rights. Michael laughed, actually laughed. Mrs. Thompson, you have no rights to someone else's property. And given the evidence of attempted fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy, I'd strongly advise against any legal action. This isn't over, Sandra snarled. We'll tell everyone what kind of person you really are, Margaret. How you abandoned your own son. The room held its breath, waiting for my response. The door to the private dining room opened again, and Eleanor Hayes walked in. Even at 70, she commanded attention. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing her trademark pearl necklace, and carrying herself with the bearing of someone who'd spent 30 years as a circuit court judge. I believe I can speak to Mrs. Thompson's character, Eleanor announced. For those who don't know me, I'm Judge Eleanor Hayes, retired. I've known Margaret for 40 years, and I've been watching this situation deteriorate for the past 2. David's face went even paler, if that was possible. Everyone knew Judge Hayes by reputation. She was famous for her zero tolerance of financial crimes. 6 months ago, Eleanor continued, Margaret came to me concerned about irregularities in her accounts. As a friend, I advised her to protect herself. As someone with legal experience, I helped her document everything. What you've heard today is just the tip of the iceberg. She pulled out a tablet. I have here sworn affidavits from 3 neighbors who witnessed David and Sandra loading Margaret's belongings into their cars to sell. Security footage from the pawn shop where Sandra sold family heirlooms. Bank records showing systematic theft. More importantly, Eleanor's voice hardened, I have evidence that David forged Margaret's signature on loan applications, using her house as collateral. That's federal fraud. The room was dead silent. As a former judge, I've seen many elder abuse cases. This is textbook: isolation, financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and attempted false imprisonment. The fact that it's her own son makes it more heinous, not less. Marcus had finished his call. Aunt Margaret, there are officers outside if you want to press charges. Sandra looked like she might faint. David was gripping the table so hard, his knuckles were white. Not yet, I said. I have one more thing to reveal. The weight of family opinion was crushing David and Sandra. Uncle Tom stood up, his voice heavy with disgust. Robert was my best friend for 30 years. We served together in Vietnam. If he knew what you've done to Margaret... He couldn't finish the sentence. Aunt Rose, the family matriarch at 82, spoke from her wheelchair. In my day, we took care of our elders. We didn't plot to lock them away and steal their homes. David Thompson, your grandfather, would turn in his grave. You're all taking her side, Sandra shrieked. You don't live with her. You don't know what she's really like. I know exactly what she's like, Helen said firmly. She's the one who took care of Mom when she had cancer. She's the one who helped Tom through his divorce. She's the one who loaned money to half this family without ever asking for it back. My nephew James added, Aunt Margaret paid for my daughter's surgery when our insurance wouldn't cover it. Never asked for a penny back. She bought my wedding dress, Cousin Lisa said quietly, when Mom and Dad couldn't afford it. One by one, family members began sharing stories. Margaret had helped with down payments, covered medical bills, provided free childcare, offered her home during hard times. The contrast with David and Sandra's greed became starker with each testimony. Stop it, David shouted. Stop acting like she's some kind of saint. She's controlling. She's manipulative. No, son, Tom said coldly. That's you. You're describing yourself. The restaurant manager appeared at the door, concerned about the raised voices. Eleanor smoothly intercepted him, but the message was clear. This needed to end soon. We're leaving, Sandra announced, grabbing her purse. Actually, I said, you're not. Not until you hear my terms. David suddenly dropped to his knees beside my chair, tears streaming down his face. Mom, please, I'm sorry. We made terrible mistakes, but we're family. Where will we go? We have nothing. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, complete with shaking shoulders and gasping sobs. 20 years ago, it might have worked, but I'd watched him practice crying in the mirror when he was 15, trying to get out of punishment for stealing from my purse. David, get up, I said coldly. You're embarrassing yourself. Please, Mom, think about what Dad would want. He'd want us to forgive each other. We can start over. Your father, I said clearly, left you a life insurance policy worth $50,000. You cashed it out 2 years ago and lost it all gambling. Don't invoke his memory to manipulate me. Sandra tried to pull David to his feet. Get up! She's not worth it! We don't need her! Actually, you do, Michael interjected. Your apartment lease is up next month. You're 3 months behind on your car payments, and your credit cards are maxed out. Without Mrs. Thompson's house, you're looking at bankruptcy. How do you know that? Sandra snarled. Public records and credit reports are quite revealing, Michael replied smoothly. David was still on his knees, now grabbing at my hand. Mom, I'm your son, your only child. Doesn't that mean anything? I pulled my hand away. It meant everything. Past tense. You killed that relationship when you plotted to imprison me. The family watched in stunned silence as David Thompson, 42 years old, successful businessman according to his Facebook, pillar of the community according to his LinkedIn, groveled on the floor of an expensive restaurant, begging his mother for the forgiveness he didn't deserve. I stood up, looking down at my son still on his knees. Here are my terms. You have 30 days to remove yourselves and all your belongings from my home. You will return my mother's jewelry that Sandra borrowed. You will repay the $43,000 you stole, though I know you can't, so I'll settle for you never contacting me again. 30 days? Sandra gasped. That's impossible. It's generous, Eleanor said. I recommended immediate eviction and criminal charges. I continued, the house will be put in a trust. Emily will be the beneficiary after I'm gone, the only family member who showed me genuine love and respect. The rest of my assets will be divided between charities and the family members who never tried to exploit me. You can't do this! David struggled to his feet. I'll contest it. I'll prove you're not competent. Try it, Michael said. We have 3 independent psychiatric evaluations confirming Mrs. Thompson's excellent mental health. We also have your forged documents, your gambling records, and now 30 witnesses to your attempted fraud. I looked around the room at my family. I want you all to understand something. This isn't about revenge. It's about dignity. It's about the right of every person, regardless of age, to live free from exploitation and abuse. Helen was crying. Tom nodded approvingly. Emily squeezed my hand. Furthermore, I added, I'm establishing a fund for elder abuse victims. My experience will help others. David and Sandra, your names and this story will be public record. Everyone will know what you tried to do. You're destroying us, Sandra wailed. No, I corrected. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just refusing to be your victim. The room was silent except for Sandra's angry breathing and David's defeated whimpers. The tension in the room was suffocating. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Sandra's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. Her fists clenched so tight her fake nails were digging into her palms. You vindictive old bitch, she hissed, low enough that she probably thought only I could hear, but the acoustics in the private dining room carried her words to everyone. Aunt Rose gasped, Such language! At your own mother-in-law! She's not my mother, Sandra exploded. She's nothing to me. Just an obstacle, a burden we've carried for 5 years. The only thing you've carried, Tom said dangerously, is her wallet. To the casino, to the shopping mall, to everywhere except a job interview. David seemed to have given up entirely. He slumped in his chair, staring at nothing, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His business partner had already left, texting something about reconsidering their partnership. His reputation, so carefully crafted on social media, was crumbling in real time. There's one more thing, I announced, pulling out a final document. This is a restraining order. If either of you come within 500 feet of me after the 30 days, you'll be arrested. If you try to contact me, harass me, or slander me publicly, I will pursue both criminal and civil charges. You planned all this, David said numbly. You've been planning this for months. 6 months, actually, I confirmed, since the day I overheard Sandra on the phone with her sister, laughing about how they'd put me in the cheapest home they could find and pocket the rest of the house money. The family's disgust was palpable. Several cousins were recording everything on their phones. This would be all over the family Facebook group within hours. We should go, Sandra said, pulling at David's arm. This is what happens when you underestimate a grandmother who's had enough. If you're still watching, you're about to witness the most satisfying conclusion. But first, I need to know. Do you think Margaret is being too harsh? Or is this exactly what David and Sandra deserve? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story about standing up to family bullies, share this video with them. Now, let's see how Margaret delivers her final blow. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, before you go, there's something else you should know. I've known about your plans since July. Not January. July. The room went still. David's head snapped up, confusion replacing defeat on his face. Remember when you had that barbecue for Sandra's birthday? I continued. You didn't realize your bedroom window was open. I heard everything. How you'd been planning this for over a year. How you'd researched the cheapest facilities. How you'd already talked to a real estate agent about my house. Eleanor pulled out her tablet again. July 15th, to be exact. Margaret came to me that very night. We've been building this case for 6 months. Every conversation you've had since then, Michael added. Margaret has been 3 steps ahead. The confused episodes you reported, she was testing you. The missing items, she moved them herself to see if you'd steal them. The jewelry Sandra sold? I smiled coldly. Those were replicas. The real pieces have been in a safety deposit box since August. Sandra's mouth fell open. But, the pawn shop! Paid you for fake pearls and cubic zirconia. The real diamonds from my mother? Safe and sound, and waiting for Emily. The revelation hit them like a physical blow. Every move they'd made, every scheme they'd plotted, I'd been watching, documenting, preparing. The power of attorney you thought you had, I continued. I revoked it the day after that surgery 2 years ago. The document you've been showing banks? Fraudulent. Every transaction you made with it? Criminal. You set us up, David whispered, horror dawning on his face. No, I corrected. I gave you 6 months to do the right thing. 6 months to stop planning to betray me. You chose this path every single day for 6 months. Let me show you exactly how prepared I was, I said, as Michael pulled out an iPad. These are screenshots from the security cameras I had installed in July, hidden ones. You never noticed because you were too busy going through my things. The screen showed Sandra in my bedroom, going through my jewelry box. Another showed David photographing my financial documents at 3 a.m. Another caught Sandra on the phone. The old bat has no idea what's coming. Every room except your bedroom and bathroom, I explained. Everything recorded and backed up to the cloud, 3 copies with 3 different lawyers. Dr. Harrison, my physician, stood up from a corner table where he'd been sitting quietly. I'm Dr. Marcus Harrison. I've been Mrs. Thompson's doctor for 15 years. I'm here to confirm that I've tested her cognitive function every month for the past 6 months. She scores in the 99th percentile for her age group. You brought witnesses? David asked weakly. Oh, David, I said almost pityingly. I brought an army. Mrs. Chen from next door is outside. She has photos of you loading my furniture into a rental truck. Mr. Peterson from the bank is here. He can testify about your attempted fraudulent transactions. Should I continue? Eleanor added, We also have sworn statements from 3 separate elder care facilities confirming that Sandra called them, specifically asking for the cheapest beds and whether residents' assets could be used to pay for care. The final nail? Michael pulled out one more document. This is a report from a private investigator. David, you've been having an affair for 2 years. Sandra, you knew and didn't care because you were having your own. The only thing keeping you together was the plan to steal this house. Sandra and David looked at each other with pure hatred. I stood up, feeling 40 years younger, my voice carrying all the authority of a woman who'd raised a family, built a career, and survived every challenge life had thrown at her. Let me tell you about sacrifice, David. For 40 years, I worked double shifts during tax season. I missed vacations to pay for your college. I went without new clothes so you could have the latest everything. Your father and I saved every penny so you'd have a better life than we did. My voice grew stronger. When you were 10 and broke Tommy Morrison's nose because he called you poor, I worked extra hours to pay his medical bills instead of letting you face consequences. When you were 17 and crashed your car drunk, I paid for the lawyer who kept you out of jail. Every time you failed, I cushioned your fall. That was your job, David protested. You're my mother. And that's where I failed, I admitted. I raised a son who believes he's entitled to everything without earning anything. Your father would be heartbroken to see what you've become. I turned to address the entire family. Robert worked construction for 43 years. His hands were so calloused he could barely hold a pencil, but he never complained. He never took what wasn't his. He never schemed or lied or betrayed anyone's trust. Looking back at David, I delivered the final blow. Your father's last words to me were, "Take care of our boy." I thought that meant protecting you. Now I realize it means protecting the world from what you've become. You're not my mother anymore, David said coldly, finally standing. No, I agreed. I'm not. A mother has a son who loves her. All I have is a stranger who tried to destroy me. The words hung in the air like a funeral bell. Sandra suddenly lunged at me, her face twisted with rage. I'll kill you, you old bitch! But Tom and Marcus were faster. Tom caught Sandra's arm while Marcus stepped between us, his police training evident in how quickly he controlled the situation. That's assault, Marcus said calmly, pulling out his badge. Mrs. Thompson, do you want to press charges? Sandra was screaming now, completely unhinged. She ruined everything! Everything! We had it all planned! Sandra, shut up! David hissed, but it was too late. No, I'm done being quiet. 2 years of pretending to care about her. 2 years of listening to her stories about the good old days. 2 years of acting like she mattered. The restaurant manager had called security. 2 uniformed guards appeared at the door. Eleanor held up a document. This is a restraining order, already signed by Judge Patterson. Effective immediately, you're both banned from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Thompson. You can't do this, Sandra shrieked as security moved toward her. We live there. Not anymore, I said quietly. Your belongings will be placed in storage. You can arrange pickup through my attorney. David finally seemed to wake from his stupor. You're throwing us on the street tonight? The same way you planned to throw me into Willowbrook, I replied, except I'm giving you the courtesy of a hotel voucher for 3 nights, which is more than you would have given me. As security escorted them toward the door, Sandra turned back one last time. You'll die alone, you miserable old woman. Perhaps, I said calmly, but I'll die free, in my own home, surrounded by people who actually love me. Can you say the same? The door closed behind them with a decisive click. The silence after they left was deafening. Then slowly, Aunt Rose began to clap. Tom joined her, then Helen. Soon, the entire room was applauding, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion I'd been holding back for months. Margaret, Helen said, coming to embrace me. I'm so sorry we didn't see it sooner. We should have protected you. We all should have, Tom added, his voice thick with guilt. The signs were there. We just didn't want to believe David could do something like this. One by one, family members came forward. Apologies, hugs, tears. My cousin Martha announced she was starting a family fund to help older relatives protect themselves. James offered to review everyone's financial documents for free to prevent fraud. I'm proud of you, Grandma, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. So incredibly proud. You're the strongest person I know. We all need to do better, Aunt Rose announced from her wheelchair. We talk about family values, but we don't check on each other. We don't protect each other. That changes today. Marcus had been on his phone, coordinating with other officers. Aunt Margaret, we've had them escorted to a hotel. They won't be allowed near your house. I'll personally make sure of it. Eleanor raised her water glass. To Margaret Thompson, who proved that age is not weakness, that dignity has no expiration date, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be a victim. To Margaret, the room chorused. But I wasn't done yet. This isn't just about me. It's about every parent, every grandparent who's been made to feel like a burden. We built this world. We raised these children. We deserve respect, not exploitation. Amen, Tom said firmly. And if anyone here ever treats their parents like David did, they'll answer to me. The immediate aftermath was swift and brutal for David and Sandra. Within 2 hours, the story had spread beyond our family. David's business partner officially dissolved their partnership via text message. Sandra's spa called to inform her she was terminated, effective immediately. Apparently, the owner's mother was friends with Aunt Rose. Their world is collapsing, Emily reported, checking her phone. Dad's LinkedIn is blowing up. Someone posted about what happened, and it's going viral in our town's Facebook group. Michael had been busy on his laptop. Mrs. Thompson, I've frozen the joint account they had access to and recovered $12,000 they transferred just this morning. Also, that real estate agent they'd been talking to, she's withdrawn her services and is willing to testify about their plans if needed. Dr. Harrison approached me. Margaret, I want you to know that what you did today took incredible courage. Elder abuse is vastly underreported because victims feel ashamed or afraid. You've given others permission to speak up. The restaurant manager, who'd been hovering nervously, finally approached. Mrs. Thompson, I want to apologize for the disturbance, but also to thank you. My own mother is dealing with similar issues with my brother. Seeing you stand up like this, it's inspiring. The bill's been taken care of, Tom announced. It's the least we can do. As we prepared to leave, I received a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Saw David and Sandra at the house with a police escort, packing their cars. Sandra was crying. David looked like a ghost. Good riddance. Your home is yours again. For the first time in months, I felt like I could truly breathe. The weight that had been crushing me for so long was finally lifted. That evening, I walked into my house, truly my house, for the first time in 5 years. The silence was beautiful. No whispered conversations stopping when I entered. No Sandra rearranging my things. No David going through my papers. I stood in my kitchen, my hand trailing over the counters where my mother had taught me to make pie crust, where Robert had proposed to me over morning coffee, where I'd helped Emily with her medical school applications. This was my sanctuary, and I'd almost lost it. Eleanor had insisted on staying the night, just in case, but we both knew David and Sandra wouldn't dare return. They were finished in this town. Word traveled fast, and by tomorrow, everyone would know what they'd tried to do. How do you feel? Eleanor asked, pouring us both tea from my good china. the set Sandra hadn't managed to sell. "Free," I said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel free." I walked through each room, reclaiming my space. In the guest room they'd occupied, I opened all the windows, letting fresh air chase away the stench of their betrayal. Tomorrow, I'd have it professionally cleaned. Maybe I'd turn it into an art studio. I'd always wanted to paint. "You know," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "we should write about this. A guide for other seniors. How to protect yourself. What warning signs to watch for." "The Golden Years Defense Guide," I suggested, and we both laughed. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own house, without fear for the first time in months. No more pretending to be asleep while they plotted against me. No more hiding my important papers. No more being made to feel like a burden in the home I'd bought with my own hands. I was home. I was safe. I was free. 6 months later, my life had transformed completely. The house felt alive again. Emily visited every weekend, bringing medical school friends who called me Grandma Margaret and begged for stories about my teaching days. I'd started hosting Sunday dinners for family members who'd stood by me, and the laughter that filled these rooms would have made Robert proud. The elder support group Eleanor and I founded had grown to 50 members. We met weekly at the community center, sharing stories, resources, and strategies for protecting ourselves. 3 other seniors had already used our template to safeguard their assets from exploitative relatives. "You saved my life," Mrs. Patterson told me after one meeting. "My son-in-law was doing the same thing. Because of you, I knew what to look for." Emily had flourished too, no longer carrying the weight of her parents' toxicity. She'd made Dean's List and was applying for a prestigious residency. "I can focus on my studies now," she said, "instead of worrying about you." Then came the letter from David. Michael brought it to me unopened, as instructed. "You don't have to read it," he reminded me. But I did. It was 2 pages of self-pity, blame, and manipulation. No real apology, no acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused, just complaints about how hard their lives were now and how unfair I'd been. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, "Sandra and I are getting divorced." "Good," Eleanor said when I told her. "They deserve each other's misery, but separately." I heard through the family grapevine that David was living in a studio apartment, working at a call center. Sandra had moved back with her mother in Arizona. Their grand plans for the Riverside mansion had crumbled along with their marriage. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, just relief that they could no longer hurt me. 1 year after that terrible January night, I sat in my garden, the roses Robert had planted blooming brilliantly around me. Emily was beside me, studying for her boards, while Eleanor dead-headed flowers and hummed an old tune. "Grandma," Emily said suddenly, "I need to tell you something. Dad reached out to me." My hand stilled on my teacup, but I kept my voice steady. "Oh?" "He wanted me to talk to you, to convince you to forgive him. He says he's changed, that he's getting therapy." "And what did you tell him?" Emily's voice was firm. "I told him that forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned, and that he hasn't even begun to earn it. Then I blocked his number." I felt proud of her strength, but also sad for the father-daughter relationship that had been another casualty of David's greed. "You know what I've learned this year?" I said, looking at my blooming garden. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them, who respects you, who sees your worth beyond what you can give them." "The family we choose," Eleanor added, smiling. That afternoon, Tom stopped by with his grandkids, Helen called from Boston, and Marcus brought his new baby to meet Great-Aunt Margaret. This was my family now, the ones who'd stood by me, who'd believed me, who'd helped me reclaim my life. "Sometimes," I told Emily as the sun set over my garden, "the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. I'll always love the son David was, the boy I raised, but that person is gone, and I can't sacrifice my remaining years hoping he'll return. You're the strongest person I know, Grandma." "No, sweetheart. I'm just a woman who finally learned that my worth isn't measured by how much I sacrifice for people who don't value me." A year later, another letter arrived. This time, David's handwriting was different, less angry, more resigned. Michael read it first, then handed it to me. "This one seems different." David wrote about therapy, about understanding the damage he'd caused, about the inheritance of entitlement he'd passed to his own life. He didn't ask for forgiveness or money or another chance. He just wanted me to know he was sorry. "Will you respond?" Eleanor asked. I thought about it for a long time. Then I wrote a single paragraph. "David, I acknowledge your letter. I hope you find peace and become the man your father would have been proud of. But my door remains closed. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Live well, Mother." I never heard from him again. My life continued to flourish. The Elder Support Group became a nonprofit. Emily graduated with honors and started her residency at Johns Hopkins. I traveled to Europe with Eleanor, something I'd always dreamed of but never done while sacrificing for others. On my 70th birthday, surrounded by chosen family, Emily made a toast. To Margaret Thompson, who taught us that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, that dignity has no age limit, and that the greatest inheritance you can leave is the example of a life lived with courage. As I looked around at the faces of people who truly loved me, not my house, not my money, but me, I realized this was what Robert would have wanted. Not for me to be a victim of our son's greed, but to be victorious over it. Sometimes, the greatest act of love truly is knowing when to let go. Thank you for listening to Margaret's story. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your power. Have you or someone you know faced similar family betrayal? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. If you want more stories about people who stood up against family injustice, hit subscribe and the notification bell. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice for people who don't appreciate you.